Shalom to everyone. Once again, Rav Berg from Midrashet Arova. So excited to be with you again with our Bogrot and our guests. Welcome. This week's Parshat, we're talking about Parshat Balak in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz it will be Chukat Balak, so it works out very well. What are the secrets of our Parsha? The Chofetz Chaim was once traveling from place to place. As you know, he went from place to place to sell his book, Shmirat HaLashon, Godly Tongue. And he, in those days, obviously, they had wagons, and he was on this little wagon with a wagon driver, and they're going on this sandy road, whatever, passing all these orchards, and he's going along, and suddenly, on an empty road, the road is empty, and the driver stops, and he gets off the wagon, goes in, takes a bag, a sack or something, and goes off to some trees, and he trees from the orchard, he takes apples or whatever it was into his bag, fills up the bag full of fruit, and he's starting to schlep it back to the wagon. And the Chofetz Chaim shouts, Roim, Roim, they're watching, you're being watched. And he leaves the fruit, runs into the wagon, gets the horses going, and rushes off. After a few kilometers, he stops the wagon. He says to this rabbi in the wagon, he says, "Excuse me, who was watching?" He said, "Oh, well, you're a Jew, and you have to know Hashem is always watching." And so we know, and we see from our Parshat, Hashgachat Hashem, Hashem is with us, Jewish people, and each one of us on a personal level. Okay, Parshat Balak tells us about this individual called Balak ben Zippor, who goes off to try and get Bilaam to curse the Jewish people. Rav the Cook used to teach us that the book of Bamidbar is all about Am Yisrael on the road from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael. And as you know, on the road there are troubles. There's problems on the road. When we go on the road, we say Tfilat HaDerech, pray for the road. When we finish, we cross the desert, whatever, aeroplane, whatever, we say Birkat HaGomel. And we thank Hashem. In those days, we used to bring korban, a special korban, Todah. And so, Am Yisrael is traveling in this desert, and there's a lot of troubles over there. We learn about Chet Meraglim, inside troubles, internal trouble. We learn about Korach, holiness within Am Yisrael. And then we see outright trouble, troubles with the nations of the world. And Balak sees he cannot overcome the Jewish people in a physical way, so it has to be a spiritual way. And he turns to this man called Bilaam. Who was Bilaam? So who was Bilaam? So we told about this person, and the Gemara Masechet Bava Batra, Daf Yud Dalet, says an interesting thing. It says Moshe katav sifro u'parashat Bilaam. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote his book, the Torah, and the Parsha of Bilaam. And it was something totally different. So what does that mean? And so we taught here about something totally different, about this individual who's a totally different individual. We see, the Gemara says, Lo kam Yisrael k'Moshe. There's no one being in Am Yisrael, a prophet in Am Yisrael like Moshe. But the Gemara says there has been a prophet amongst the non-Jews of the world, and his name was Bilaam. And so Hashem gave Bilaam powers of prophecy. And he said, what are you going to do with those powers? Are you going to use them for good or for bad? And he, as we see in our Parsha, he was totally used them for bad. We told in many Midrashim that he knew how to catch that split second of anger that Hashem has, and he wanted to use it to strike the Jewish people. And we see from the nature of his prophecies that they are so deep and they're so strong, and you can imagine what the curses would have been. So we see an individual who is so powerful. He's called Bilaam. The Chazal call him Bliam, without a nation. And so we meet him later on with this aton, this donkey, and we see how he goes on the donkey, and the donkey sees the angel of Hashem. He doesn't see the angel of Hashem. And finally, the donkey falls down and sees the angel of Hashem with a sword, and he whoops the donkey. And we taught over there that, hey, on the one hand he had prophecy, but on the other hand, he was lower, morally he was lower than a donkey. So now let's look into Chazal, into our sources, to see a little bit more about Bilaam. So the most important source is Avot, Perek Hey, Mishnah Yutet, and we have a very long, interesting Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Kol mi sheyesh biyado shlosha dvarim halalu. Person has these three attributes. Mitamidav shel Avraham Avinu. He is the student of Avraham Avinu. Umishlosha dvarim acherim, the opposite, mitamidav shel Bilaam Rasha, the students of Bilaam, the evil Bilaam. And so first of all, we learn over here that Bilaam is exactly the opposite of Avraham Avinu. Exactly the opposite of Avraham Avinu. And what are Avraham Avinu's big attributes? Says the Mishnah, Ayin Tova, Ruach Nemucha, Nefesh Vela. Those are the attributes of Avraham Avinu that we learn from. And Bilaam has the opposite, Ayin Ra'ah, Ruach Gvoha, Nefesh Rechava. So what are these three attributes? Let's have a look. First of all, Ayin Tova. The most important thing, Ayin Tova. We learn from Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook that Ayin Tova is to look at the world in an optimistic way, to look at the world with faith, look at a world that is filled with the goodness of Hashem, to see the good side of everything, to look for the good and to do good, to look at everyone in a positive light, to be positive and not negative, to see the goodness in everything. Ruach Nemucha is obviously humility. Nefesh Vela is the opposite of arrogance. And Bilaam has the opposite. He had a Ayin Ra'ah, an evil eye. He looked at the world in a bad way. Let's do bad. I'm looking for the bad and I want to do bad. I want to take the spirituality out of the world. I'm looking for the evil in everything. And so we are the students of Avraham Avinu. So as we know, Balak goes up to Bilaam, persuades him to come and curse the Jewish people, and Bilaam goes along with him. And they finally go, I won't tell the whole story, you can read it in the Chumash, but 4 times he tries to curse the Jewish people. He goes and sacrifices 7 sacrifices, and he goes up and he opens his mouth to curse, and there are 4 curses. Ramban comes along and tells us what the 4 curses were. The first one is in Perek Kaf Gimel Pasuk Zayin, and that is where Bilaam talks about the chosenness of the Jewish people. The next one is from in Perek Yud Chet Kaf Daled. We learned about the conquering the land, etc. Then the third one is in Perek Kaf Daled Pasuk Gimel. We see the praise of Eretz Yisrael and multiplying in Eretz Yisrael and etc. And he saw that David HaMelech would emerge. And the fourth one was he seeing more of the aspects of Mashiach. So this man really had prophecy. And can you imagine what curses he wanted to bring upon us? Hashem is watching over us. And he said, brachot. And so we come to the third bracha. The bracha we say on entering a shul, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Let's try and translate. How goodly, from the word tov, your tents, Yaakov. What is the tent over here? Mishkenotecha, we're talking about the Mishkan, the tabernacle, Yisrael. So how goodly are your tents of Yaakov and the Mishkan of Israel? Endless commentaries on this pasuk. I'd like to share with you 1 or 2 of them. First of all, we look in Rashi. Rashi, what does Rashi say? Rashi is short, but very, very meaningful. Rashi says the following, Ma tov alecha. What is good about these tents? Al shera'a pitchem she'enam mechuvanot ze mul ze. The openings of the tents weren't facing each other. And let's develop this a little bit. Who lived in the tents? Each tent was a home, a Jewish home of the Jewish people. In the tent was a Jewish mother, and she ran that home. And the home is built on values and principles and Yiddishkeit and solid values of humility and tzniut. And so the openings didn't face each other, because in our tent, said the Jewish woman, my home is different. My home sits on its own. We're not influenced by anyone else. We're not interested in looking out at anyone else. Within this little tent, says the Jewish woman, I'm going to build a Jewish home based on Torah values. And that's what's important. So he said, Ma tovu alecha, look how good those tents are. And we remember so well, Sarah Imenu. Sarah Imenu, says the Midrash at the end of Parshat Toldot, that there were 3 things in Sarah's home. The first one was Ner Daluk Meir of Shabbat, Leil Shabbat. Shabbat candles. Shabbat candles symbolize the light of Torah in the home, that the woman brings into the home. Ki ner mitzvah b'Torah or, says the Pasuk in Mishlei. Torah is light, so she lights the candles. The husband sets up the candles, she lights the candles. Bracha ba'isa, blessing in the dough, hafrashat challah, food that is spiritual, kosher food. And she takes off the bread, hafrashat challah, so the bread is spiritual. It's not only good food for our body, it's food for our soul, says the Sefer Chinuch. And finally, anan kashur l'orel. In that tent we have purity and holiness. And so each tent is so tov, and that's what this Bilaam saw. Ma tovu alecha. That is the source of the strength of the Jewish people, the Jewish mother in the Jewish home. And so that's what Bilaam saw. Bilaam saw the tov. And we have the Mishkan of Israel, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the center of sacrifices and prayer, and the lighting of the menorah. Beautiful, amazing. But first and foremost, the oil, the tent, the home. That's where it is. And he says, Ma tovu. How good it is. So what's good? What's the word tov mean? So I'd like to share with you the most amazing passage from Sefer Chinuch. As you know, Sefer Chinuch was written about 700 years ago. We think it's Rav Zachariah Levi, but we're not sure. And on Parshat Truma, speaking about the Mishkan, he says the most profound few words which I have to share with you. What does he say? What is the aim of the mitzvot? What does Hashem want from us? Says Sefer HaChinuch. No, my son, he's speaking to his son. Everything Hashem does, Rak shechafetz Hashem lativ lanu. Hashem wants to be good for us, good to us. Biyot adam muchshar mukhan, so a person be ready. Ba'asiyat otam mitzvot, to do mitzvot. Why? Lekabel tov hatova, so Hashem will be able to give us goodness. Va'as yetev lav Hashem. And so if we're good, Hashem will give us goodness. And then he says the most profound words, he adds on. He says, Al kain Hudiam derech tov liotam tovim. Derech tov liotam tovim. The way of being good in order to be good. That is what Hashem wants from us. Hashem wants for us to be tovim, to be good. That's what Hashem wants. And so that's what Bilaam sees. Ma tovu alecha. How good is that tent? The goodness of the Jewish people is in that tent, in the Jewish home, where they are, Baruch Hashem, a husband and wife, and we have beautiful Torah children growing up in the values of Torah, not looking out through that doorway, other places, sometimes through a phone or whatever. That home is a center of Torah, and that is what's important. That we know that the aim of everything is to be good, to be a good person. And by being a good person, Hashem will give us goodness. There was a famous rabbi, Rav Hanan Porat, and he said, he passed away, before he died, he said, Ratziti liot tov, I try to be good in my life. And he certainly did. And so to sum up, we learn over here in Parshat Balak about this person called Bilaam. We learn how Hashem has hashgacha, is God watching over us and protects us from this man. And that's why it's a difference. Hashem wrote the Torah and him, and about Bilaam, because it was a totally different scene. It was something totally opposite to what we used to. And we learned about how this man had such powers, spiritual powers, but morally he was so on such a low level, lower than his donkey. We learn about the light of Avraham Avinu. Bilaam is the opposite of Avraham Avinu. And what's Avraham Avinu's greatness? Ein tova, a good eye, to look at the world in a positive way, to look for goodness, to do goodness, to bring faith to the world, and to see Hashem in everything. Then we learned about the brachot that he went and said, and we focused on Matovo Alecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. We spoke how Rashi speaks about Tov. What is Tov? Tov is in the home, where the window, the doorways of the home are looking outwards. Each home is a basis of Tov, and the Jewish woman is the home. The link in a chain of the eternity of the Jewish people is the woman. A woman, she was the one who gives birth to a child, and that child is Jewish. And so she's everything in the Jewish world. And we always have to remember that. And finally, we learned about, from Sefer Chinuch, we learned that the aim of the world, the aim of Hashem, is that we'll be Tov, we'll be good, and we'll bring goodness to the world. And may each one of us go out there and create a Ohel Tov, a beautiful, wonderful Torah home that is Tov, that is goodness, and spreads goodness to the world. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Bye.